I always like to start with every session that we have with centering, grounding, a beautiful looking inward and getting down into the cellular volume of your body. So if you would please indulge me and taking your own self down into your legs. If you could stand up, that would be grand. And if you had a little room around you, that would be great. But it's not necessary. You could stay sitting as well, as long as you're sensing the great big earth under your feet. That's such an important connection and relationship. What is my earth body and the big earth body? Where do they meet? Where's the contact boundary between me and the big matter, the big earth? So take a moment to just feel your feet on the floor, on the ground, and imagine those feet spreading out like webbed feet of a critter, and really feeling that suction, magnetic energy between the earth and yourself. And if you happen to be sitting cross-legged, do the same with your sits bones of your pelvis. That's the legs of your pelvis. Just letting yourself sinking down into feet, legs, pelvis. And see if you could inhale gently and just imagine using your imagination and filling the space, the volume of your body to a place where you meet yourself on the inside to your skin from the inside, and then allow your body to expand. First of all, imagine that you're expanding upwards to the sun, to the heart of the universe, and that you're expanding into your length. Feel yourself glued to the ground with your feet or your sits bones, and imagine that your spinal column elongates very beautifully and easily, without effort. Allow it to elongate so the top of your head grows a root to the sun, and you could make yourself into a string on the musical instrument we call the universe. Just imagine you're uh, growing in length, and that's where you're centering now, in your length. You could even make a little sound if you dare. And then imagine that you're filling the space between your shoulders, between your ears, between your temples, between your hips and your knees and your legs, and really allowing yourself to center in your width. You might even want to spread your arms to say, here I am, see the wings of my heart, my arms, and imagine all of us standing in a circle. How beautiful could that be? And you could even extend your breath to your fingertips and see if you could sense the world through the filaments of your fingertips, and at the same time sense the earth and the filaments of your toes, and centering yourself in your widths, taking up space in the community, whether it's here or anywhere. And again, follow it with a breath, just allowing your breath to come, feeling that pulsation that comes from the heart as it translates out into your fingers. And then one more centering consideration, which would be your front and your back. See if you could sandwich your head between your hands for a moment and feel the depth of yourself, the depth of your thoughts, the depth of your thinking, your mind, and then the depth of your speaking, your throat, inhale and exhale, and touching one hand on the front door of your heart and maybe one hand on the back door, if you can, feeling the volume of your heart, and then sliding down, feeling your solar plexus and in the back, and your belly and your sacrum. And imagine that you're feeling the volume of your legs. Inside your volume, the three-dimensional being that you are, is written the story of your life, the story of the life of the ones you came from. And the story of your thoughts, your decisions, your desires, your arousal, it's the story of you written in the fabric, in the nervous system of your body. And if your eyes are closed, just let them be relaxed for another breath. And on the exhale, open your eyes and with a soft look around your room, look around where you are, and give a little homage to the place, to your place, the dynamic ground of your own being. Is first of all, a little bit about me. I've came to this somatic sex education hat that I'm wearing right now through all sorts of convoluted uh, roads in my life. Personally, it was fraught with a lot of misunderstanding and paradoxical learning and suffering and confusion and all sorts of things, which actually set me on my path and said, "Here, you don't know something, so find out what it is," which allowed me to explore about human sexuality, about my sexuality in particular, and about all the myths that are connected with sexuality and spirituality. Myself, I was raised with the notion that the two can't live in the same body. And if they do live in the same body, then from the belly button up, it was reserved for spirituality, and from the belly button down, it was reserved for sexuality. And I always ask myself, how did that become the way it became? So um, in the course of my life, I worked a lot with bodies. I must have touched, I don't know, in 37 years, I was a body worker. And I always, I love touching bodies. Everybody is beautiful. And what I noticed is how fraught people's relationships with their bodies are. So my heart really goes out to people that have expressed a deep confusion, dislike, or even very, very sad relationship with their body, and further their sexuality. So I always wondered, how could kindness help people open to their beauty, to their life energy, which is the same as sexual energy in my book. And then started working with couples and noticing the confusion that often shows up after the initial charge of the first flush of new energy diminishes, and how the world begins to make itself known in our relationship. But in the exploration that I offer you, one of the things I've asked myself, what does sexuality actually mean? The word itself. And what I discovered was, it was very interesting that this it's a fairly modern word, and it actually was never used in relationship to sex until the late 19th century. So that is interesting. How did people talk about sexuality before that? So I started looking into history and context of other cultures, other times, and that was interesting. And of course, spirit is the word for breath, inspiring, expiring, perspiring, and so on. So looking at spirit and spirituality, how it's connected with breath, and how breath basically informs the life force. So, some people say, "Oh, I can't desire because it gets me into trouble." What I say, well, let's see what your desire teaches you about yourself. Let us feel it. Let your body pulse and hum with your desire. And let us have a look at what is this desire telling you. Yeah, so I have a strong belief that um, each one of us, when we take the time and the desire to learn about ourselves, about our energy, our sexuality, that slowing down and going inward, that all the wisdom I need to know is in there, and fueled by let's say ancestral messages that are already there that I may have not discovered yet. But also, I'm a great believer in looking to teachers and looking for resources and trying out different tools that might help me to unlock the life flow energy, the life force energy in my body. In my workshops, we use breath and movement and creative imagination, and also interactive uh, learning from each other, because we can learn a lot by being in relationship with each other. And by reflective self-reflection and looking at things like, where did I learn about sexuality? Where did all this come from? How am I influenced by the world? What have I taken in? What are the myths that I'm carrying, the beliefs, you might say? And so in the work that we do, I use poetry, I use movement to unlock the energy inside in ourselves, because a lot of us carry unconscious shame and guilt or barriers against full aliveness. I noticed that particularly this COVID time, where one of you have already mentioned about the longing, the desire for touch, the longing for touch, by noticing its absence. And so we might do quite a bit of work in the 4-week series about self-touch, and also looking at what is my teaching about pleasure and pain in the body. So exploring all these, I'm a somatic sex educator, so everything I do is through the body. Uh, in the West, we've had so many years of separation between sexuality and spirituality that there's a wound there that's very deep, and some of it is very unconscious. And so looking at, so suddenly, people got very drawn to Tantra, which means to weave. The very word means to weave. And the cosmology of Tantra is what's very attractive to people, because when the origin story of Tantra is where God was so bored, he split, or she split, or they split in two, and born was the feminine and the masculine far, far away from each other, and they became very, very lonely. And so what happens, pretty soon they made wild love, and the masculine and feminine mixed, and they made love, and boom, an orgasm, and voila, there you were. Voila, there were the planets. So the cosmology of Tantra is that everything was born from the orgasmic dance of the gods in bliss and ecstasy and desire, by the way. This is the desire dancing with itself. And of course, the way I was raised in the in the in the Catholic world, where there was so much emphasis on original sin, particularly for the women who screwed up really big by eating the apple of knowledge, and boom, out we were thrown out of paradise. So that my origin story was not one of bliss, not one of orgasm. It was one of sin. So I think in our culture, speaking people, European, North American, Western, modern uh, uh, ways of being taught, even unconsciously, that split is still in operation, and it shows up even in non-religious ways. Most people I know have some kind of uh, some kind of split between sexuality and spirituality. And we'll talk a lot about that. And there'll be practices that we will give us as homework experiments that would help you to understand that. Because, yeah, so there'll be a lot of self-exploration that will happen during these 4 weeks. And it'd be very interesting to see how it is for you. Tantra itself actually understands that all the energies dance inside the body, each body. And they're just more prevalent in at certain times in life. Like for myself, I know that there was times in my life where I was probably what some people would call more feminine, more yin, more retiring, more whatever. And then the energy that I've developed is a lot more juicy and out there. So we could name those energies, but I look at it more as polarities. And the polarities, just like when you think of magnets, you know, or night and day, they're not opposites, they're complementary. And I think that's how the tantric community in its original, it's a big conversation, because what shows up in the West as tantra is not the entire picture of tantra. So when you read uh, some of the ancient texts, it's very different from the way it's being taught in tantra workshops.